when we sample for plastic in the bag.
You're what? What is it?
I'll talk about it because I don't have anything else to talk about.
Spoiler alert, right?
You go.
Yeah, that's all right.
Nice. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for coming. I know it's the last time slot at the end of a long conference, so I appreciate everybody coming out. Since we have sort of an equal number of presenters and audience members, we'll definitely look at this as a little bit of a conversation. So this panel has a little bit of a clunky title, but the way I envision sort of implementing advocacy strategies to reduce pollution and improve environmental health in the Chesapeake Bay, what I was looking at here was, I thought, in 90 minutes we can't talk about how to organize advocacy strategies or build campaigns or something like that, but I thought, let's talk about some different ideas, let's talk about some different approaches. And so all of these four amazing people that are on the panel are bringing sort of new approaches to this work. So I'll just introduce myself and then them briefly, and then we'll go through and have them talk a little bit about their work and then open it up for questions. So my name is Brent Boland. I'm the Clean Water Coalition Director at the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. I work with watershed groups and community groups all over the state on different issues. Environmental justice has been a significant personal and professional interest of mine over a period of years, and I'm glad to continue to be working in that space. So very glad to participate in this conference. I put together a panel for Shakobe's first conference 2 years ago, so that was very exciting, very well attended, excellent event. So I was very excited to be asked to participate in this one. So part of it, if you read the little blurb that I wrote for the conference description, it was something along the lines of, effective advocacy is about, bringing the right people to the right place at the right time with the right goal. And so that's sort of, I think, the lens we're looking at here. And what these people are doing is different ways of reaching the right people and bringing them into the conversation. Hi. So quickly, I'll just introduce everybody, and then we'll go ahead and go through. So Suzanne Ecken runs the, what's your title, Director? Coordinator of the... There you go. Of the Anne Arundel Watershed Stewards Academy, which has been an extremely successful educational model for watershed restoration. It's being replicated all over the state. And what's really interesting about their approach is that it's, a pure community engagement and education sort of effort to bring people into these issues in a way that's a little bit different than an advocacy stance. And so I don't want to steal too much thunder, but that's why I asked her to be here. Jody Rose is the Executive Director of Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. And their work, as you might guess, involves bringing the faith community into the clean water work that we're doing here in the Chesapeake Bay region. And I think that the organization over the last several years has been very dynamic in the places it's getting into and the conversations it's having and the programs that it's running, so that, people that are communities of faith that are often outside the column for the environmental community are now being brought in what I think is a very positive way. Then Julie Lawson is the Director of Trash Free Maryland and Trash Free Virginia. Her work with trash in communities, so she works at everything from the local level in communities, municipalities, counties, state level policy. As you'll see from her jar, there's field research involved, there's behavior change work going on. So her operation is incredibly soup to nuts. And I asked her just recently to join this panel because as I was thinking through what everybody else was going to be talking about, I realized how cross-cutting her work was and how it integrated pieces of what everybody else was doing. So I thought that would be a good tie-in in terms of more, because Julie has more of an advocacy stance. And then finally, my colleague Ramon from the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, he's our Latino program director. And so he came on board earlier this year and has been really doing some great work in Maryland, reaching out to Latino communities that, frankly, the environmental community hasn't done a very good job of talking to or engaging, and frankly a lot of people haven't because there's some obvious barriers there. So he's been doing some great work building bridges out in communities. So what I asked these folks to do is just spend a few minutes sort of talking about their work and their approach to it and how they see it contributing to a cleaner Chesapeake and a more just environment. So I don't know who wants to go first. You guys have your PowerPoints ready, so Suzanne, you want to go first? Okay, great. Thank you.
So I think we're doing 10 minutes each, so can someone give me like a 5, 2, and 1?
Sure.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I have a PowerPoint, but as Jody and I were talking about, it's really just to sort of keep me on track and keep me honest. So, but I see a lot of like friends in the room, but how many people have heard of or are familiar with Watershed Stewards Academy? Okay, good. So some of you, how many people participate in the National Capital Region Watershed Stewards Academy? Oh, good. Hi. Okay, so I'm going to tell a quick story and then sort of try to tie what we do to advocacy. So Watershed Stewards Academy was born out of a collaboration between the public school system and Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works, and here's how it went. So DPW was starting to do different things with stormwater. They were starting to move from collect and convey to some ecosystem types of restoration, and the school system, wanting a really exciting action-oriented experience for students, would have students plant and grow the native plants and then plant them within these restoration projects. And so what ended up happening was that as these projects were planted, parents and the surrounding community would be involved, and they would begin to understand what stormwater is, why it's a problem, and they'd say, look, I want to help, I want to do something, I know that we all need to do something. And so the Department of Public Works and the school system staff began to work then with the communities, and they very quickly realized 3 things. First thing is people really want to make a difference. They want to do something. The second thing is they have no idea where to get started. And then the third thing is there is not capacity within those 2 government institutions to provide that leadership. And so the Watershed Stewards Academy was born to create leaders within communities who can respond to that need. So that's sort of the story and the context with which we're going to get started. So we are Anne Arundel County based, and throughout our county you can see that we have degraded water systems. So this is not an issue that is unique to urban areas. It's not an issue that's unique to any community. Throughout Anne Arundel County there are degraded streams, and the only reason there aren't as many dots in the western part of the county or perhaps the southern or the northern is that those areas hadn't been completely yes. So the other thing that we should realize is that private sector land is about 2/3 of the land area in Anne Arundel County, homes, businesses, churches, and it contributes 46% of the nitrogen load and 39% of the phosphorus load. So if we're going to attack stormwater, we really have to be engaging with people who own and manage private property. That's, got to do that. So what the Stewards Academy intends to do is to identify citizens who either are or could be leaders, and then we educate them through an intensive certification process which lasts about a year to become master watershed stewards, and then we support them as they go forth and take action within their communities. So a couple of really, I think, unique things that lend themselves to advocacy specifically is that stewards are coming from whatever community they choose, and so they're already a part of that community. They're already integrated in the community. It's not someone outside coming into a community saying, here's what you should do. And so they already know the players, they know the culture, they know the the history. The other piece of that is more often than not the stewards are in that community for an extended period of time, which is very different than, say, an organization, nonprofit, or even government person coming into a community to coordinate some action. So watershed stewards are there for the long haul. They're part of the community, and communities, could be residential communities, could be a place of business. We have stewards that work with schools, and now through our partnership with Jody and Kolya, we are working intensively with churches. So, communities take all manner. There are three things that stewards are trained to do. The first thing is that they're trained to assess their community to identify what are the pollution sources and what are the opportunities for restoration. So there's not unlimited time and money, and stewards don't have time, and they're not resources to do everything in every community. So you really have to hone down and identify what are the strategies that are going to be the biggest bang for the buck. And so we do an environmental assessment, but also a social assessment. So have to sort of match, what works from, a scientific standpoint with what really works for the community. So that individual assessment is the first thing that they learn to do and do. Second thing is to educate and engage their communities. So last year, 130 stewards had one-on-one conversations or small group conversations with about almost 10,000 people in our county. And so tailoring that education to the need. And then the last thing that they learn to do is to coordinate action. And so I always ask the stewards, ask not what you can do for your watershed, ask what your community can do for your watershed, because that's a much more powerful thing. So 2 general categories, just so you know what the lay of the land is. We're asking them to sort of help their communities understand and implement rainscaping projects, so the small scale rain garden, rain barrel, conservation landscape, slow it down, spread it out, soak it in, that piece. And then the other thing is to make behavioral changes that will reduce pollution, changes in lawn care, trash, septic systems, pet waste pickup. So those are the 2 kind of types of things. So as this relates to advocacy, when our organization started, there was a broad coalition of people that came together to say, here's what's needed. Here's what you need to go forth and do. And some people were wanting us to train people for political action, and some people wanted us to train people to do big restoration projects. So there are lots of ideas floating around there. And so for the last 6 years, we've been doing this program where we're educating these citizens. Over the last year, we went through a strategic planning process in which we really tried to look at the many roles that the Stewards Academy could play and say, where do we want to put our resources? Where do you think we have the biggest bang for the buck? And so many stewards and some of our key environmental leaders, am I at 5 minutes yet?
No, you're at like
Okay.
3.
Okay, good. All right, good. Gosh, that was fast. You were just paying attention?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of people wanted us, we've got this broad coalition of engaged, really educated people out there. Let's use them to turn the tide of some environmental regulations, both locally and on the state level. So we went through the strategic planning process, and we recognized that there was this really passion on the part of a lot of stewards to do advocacy. We also realized that we were not reaching all of the communities across Anne Arundel County. We have made a conscious effort to reach up into northern Anne Arundel County, where watershed involvement is less common because of the culture and the socioeconomic demographics, and then also because those people tend to view themselves as disconnected from the waterways. And in the southern part of the county, we don't have as many watershed stewards, but we need those watershed stewards. We need to appeal to every single community. And so we thought if we become an advocacy organization, we could polarize ourselves. We could make ourselves less attractive to people who don't necessarily have our same viewpoint. And so what we decided to do is to disengage from the political arena and then connect watershed stewards with League of Conservation Voters or other organizations that do advocacy in our action. And here's what happened. People get educated, and it's like being in the Garden of Eden and eating the apple, and your eyes are opened, and then you can't go back. And so we have this engaged group that just through our education is then their eyes are opened about what else is going on in the political arena. So stewards are very active out there. These are some statistics from 2013. And they're doing a whole lot of rainscaping. They're doing a whole lot of planting native plants. They're engaging a whole lot of volunteers. But they're also very concerned about what's happening not only in their community, but they recognize that what happens on their piece of property in their neighborhood is only one piece of the puzzle, because there are things that have to happen on the part of the Department of Public Works. There are things that have to happen on the state level and the federal level in order to make their personal investment in their own communities successful. So this is our distribution of watershed stewards throughout Anne Arundel County. We have about 130 that we've trained. About 100, I'm going to say maybe 120 are still very active. And they're spread throughout the county. So we are working very hard to get folks from northern, western, and southern counties involved. So this is just a picture of what one steward's done in a community. This is a steward who lives in a fairly small community, and she's a very active watershed steward, and she did not do all of these projects, but because of her leadership, all of these projects have gotten done. So we want to see stewards not only working, with one or two people on demonstration projects, but really empowering others. And so then all of these people who've done projects on their own property, their eyes are open too. They understand what stormwater is, and so when they start hearing things like rain tax, they sort of understand, at least what stormwater is. Last thing I'm going to talk about is a really fun new partnership that I have with Jody and Kolya, and you might be talking about more of it, so I'll just go through a little bit. So we understand that we need to reach all audiences across Anne Arundel County, and we can't just continue to pull from our watershed organizations or people that are already engaged in environmental issues if we want to reach all communities. And so together with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay and the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, we have helped to create this partnership to inspire and empower faith congregations to care for God's creation. So essentially what this is that we've recruited 28 watershed stewards from area churches, and they have agreed to become watershed stewards to work with their congregations to engage them in creation care. Part of that engagement is the installation of a professionally designed and installed project or projects on their church grounds, and so there's funding for that, and the Alliance is taking care of those projects. Another piece is an environmental ministry that they'll be doing within their congregations, and Kolya is actually teaching the classes that will empower them. I'm sorry, yeah, this is Kolya, that's Kolya. That will empower them to create this environmental ministry, which will not only help them understand how their own faith connects with the natural world, but then translate that into real action for others. So this is Kervin. He's one of our watershed stewards. We have a really exciting partnership with a gentleman who you guys may have met. I'm sure he's been here, Reverend Calhoun. Reverend Johnny Calhoun's from Mount Olive AME Church in Annapolis, and he heard about this program, and he said, I'm going to get all my friends to be a part of this. I'm going to reach out to all the other African American pastors, because this is an exciting program, and he has an initiative called Black is the New Green. Hasn't that been part of this? Anyway, so he really wants to see environmental issues and environmental actions as squarely part of the African American heritage, not only in the past, in the present, and planning for the future. And he sees a very close tie, and so he wanted to make sure that we had representation from the African American community. So many of our watershed stewards are from that. The watershed stewards that are part of this Riverwise congregations have three roles. They are coordinating within their community to make sure that the projects that happen on their church ground are grounded in what their church wants. They do design and implement an environmental ministry, and then they are the leading creation care expert that can provide for the long-term maintenance of the stormwater projects. So that's why having sort of an engaged and educated person as part of this Riverwise Congregations program is so crucial, because after the Alliance leaves and we leave and Jody leaves, there's someone left at the church that will make sure not only that the project is successful, but that there's ongoing engagement. So it's just sort of one of the ways that we're hoping to reach out to other audiences. So I think that's all that's all I had to say.
Could you just say a little bit about the social marketing aspects of your work?
Yeah, so so with this sort of pollutant reducing behavior change, one of the things that, a little bit of the Kool-Aid that I drank in my own professional development is that the realization that just giving people information about something does not make them change their behavior, and I can look at that in my own life, and we can all look at those. And so as we're helping stewards to go out there and encourage their communities to change behavior, we know that we can't just give them information about why and just expect them to go regurgitate that to their communities and expect anything's going to happen. And so we've been working with Julie and many other professionals around the region to create community-based social marketing programs. And does anybody know what community-based social marketing is? So it's essentially this idea. It's essentially this idea that if people are going to change their behaviors, they're going to do it because the benefits to doing so outweigh the barriers. So we all have reasons why we don't change our behavior. So for example, I know that, this might be too long. Is this too long of an answer? I know that I should really use reusable bags when I go to the grocery store, right? Yeah. So, so I have all these reusable bags, and about, maybe it's been 3-4 years ago now. My daughter's 4, so it's 3 years ago that I was thinking about this community-based social marketing, and I was recognizing that I had an environmental behavior that I was not implementing, even though I had a desire and knowledge. And so I knew that when I was going into the grocery store, I would come out with plastic bags. So, and I really wanted to change that behavior. And I thought, well, what are my barriers to doing that, right? I know the benefits. The benefits are I know that why we shouldn't use plastic bags, and I want to change this behavior. But so I thought, well, maybe it's because I don't have the bags in the car. So I put the bags in the car and went to the grocery store, and I still came out with plastic bags. So I said, well, maybe I'll put them up on the front seat. Well, I still came out with plastic bags. So as I go into the grocery store, you know, they would have the prompts. You know, did you bring did you remember your reusable bag? So I'm in there with my infant, walking around and knowing I have like 4.2 minutes to do this grocery run, and I am not going back out to the car to get my things. But that was a prompt, right? And I thought, well, that might help me remember. So I said, well, I should really make a prompt and put it on my steering wheel. Well, I didn't do that. So one day I was in the grocery store. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and no one was in the grocery store. And I didn't have my daughter with me, and I'm doing this grocery shopping. And I live on the Eastern Shore, which is very far from where I work. And I usually don't see anyone I know, but one aisle over was someone else that I know from my professional community, and I had no reusable bags. And there is no way I was getting out of that shopping line without my reusable. So I said to the clerk, quick, give me some of those bags, I'll buy them, and then I'll have these reusable bags. And that's what turned it for me. It was the pressure, it was the social pressure. And so then I went home that night and I made my prompt and I put it on my steering wheel. And so that helped me change my behavior. So it's very similar when stewards are working in their communities. They have to figure out what it is that their community needs to change that behavior, and then work to try to change it. Funny enough, my supervisor went to a grocery store, and she got a text when she was out in the parking lot that said, "Plastic bags?" Question mark, question mark. She's like, wait a minute, I didn't see anything. So, you know, you have to figure out sort of what makes your audience tick. And so that's what that behavior change stuff is all about. It's fun, but it's real. Like you don't want to just give people information and call it a day and think you've done your job, right? You haven't. So we do some of that, and it's fun. That's it.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great, great, great.
Oh, sorry, I left that.
No, that's fine. Let me figure out where I need to go. Were you able to have your notes up too? Did you figure that out, Suzanne?
If you go under presenters tools, that's how you do it.
Hmm?
Presenters tools, probably under view or slideshow.
Presentation views.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it.
Notes,
It is.
notes page, presentation views that. Yeah, notes over.
Oh, this?
I don't know. It says.
On the
Yeah, try it.
slideshow,
That's a trick. Print it down.
Go to slideshow, up in the top bar.
Sorry. All right, so if I do preview, oh, it's not going to give it. All right, well, we're going to
You
do
know what you're talking about, Jody.
Actually, so that's interesting. That's where I'm going to start, is that this was a good challenge, Brent, because, well, I'm Jody Rose with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, and I've been at this for all of about 14 months. And my background is actually in environmental consulting. I was working on the other side of the fence for many years and kind of had an epiphany. I was sharing this with somebody over lunch. That I was really in the business of helping the corporate world circle around regulations. And it had been nagging at me for many years. And then I kind of scaled back my work. I ran a small business out of my home. I had children, yada, yada, yada. And I'm trying to piece together consulting work with kids at home. And I'm sitting at the stoplight headed to yet one other very oppressed neighborhood to do an environmental liability assessment. And across the street walks this apparently homeless man and struggling, and here I'm going to go and I'm going to do an environmental liability assessment of some big industry, and all this money is going to exchange between lawyers and bankers, and nothing is going to change for this man. And I just bawled my eyes out. And that was it. That was the end of it for me. And I began a journey of going a different direction with my life. And I knew enough to land myself in the faith community. I'm not a theologian, but I'm a spiritually focused person. I'm a cradle Catholic, which means that I was Catholic long before I even knew what that really meant. And but so here we are, and we've been doing strategies for engaging the faith community for since I've been there, and this was a good challenge to unpack it. So I do kind of want my notes, but we're going to go for it. So why would we engage with the faith community? We probably all know these points, but they have a natural connection to creation care. There is low-hanging fruit there. I'm not saying every congregation is low-hanging fruit, but we can start somewhere, and that's where I recommend. That's a strategic engagement approach, is to start with the low-hanging fruit. Those would be maybe congregations that have a green ministry already, and you go to their website and you can see that they're engaging in certain activities, and maybe they even incorporate this into their mission statement, that kind of thing. It's an opportunity to reach new audiences. Sometimes people say, you're investing so much time and effort into one site. Why would we be taking all this, grant funding, $50,000 of grant funding for one particular site? Well, you are reaching potentially hundreds of people with that $50,000. You can work your way up to denominational leaders. We all know that they have the ear of our legislative regulators, and of course, they're landowners. So there's opportunities to do demonstration projects and actually have measurable impact. So this isn't just about organizing. You can actually make measurable improvements. But before you have advocates, you must build commitment. And so I think that's where IPC is. We do this awareness, this conscience formation process. We do the education, and a lot of it is very analogous to what Suzanne was just talking about. And then, helping them acquire some new knowledge, and then developing that more, driven approach, that there is a spiritual and a personal impetus for this. So IPC, our board chair is Rabbi Nina Beth Cardin, and her phrase is, we're way upstream, we go for the soul. And it is kind of where we are. We're forming faithful stewards, caring for sacred waters. And this is kind of an interesting, and this is a good thing to write down. There's a website called thearda.com. It's the Association of Religion Data Archives. And they have a lot of interesting facts They're a not-for-profit, and they've got all sorts of data on their website that's searchable, everything from how many congregations are in this particular region to they actually take national poll surveys and they break them down depending on, what was the topic. And this was one I just recently found, and I said, okay, this is going in our slide deck because faith community never has data on the screen, so this is good. We got data now too. But the question was, to what extent can you say you've been spiritually touched by the beauty of creation? And if you can see, I pointed out many days, most days, every day, and that's pretty much 75% of the respondents said that they've had some kind of personal connection with creation. So that's the foundation of awareness. That is a little bit of why are we going to, what is the low-hanging fruit? What is the connection here? This is data that shows. That's a little bit of the connection. We know this, we have this in our gut. We know that this is why we're doing it, but, here's some data that actually proves it. And then this is awareness of the sacredness of water. Most global religions have some kind of tradition that incorporates water. Water is sacred. It connects us to each other. And IPC, we use the language of, how we treat water is a direct reflection of our love for not only our Creator, but for those around us, that this is an interpersonal thing. This isn't just about nature. And just to give you a little example of what are some of our strategies, this is a slide we use a lot when we go out and we talk to congregations, and I'll just do it for you so you can see it is in action. How many of us actually can go to our neighborhood pool or apartment pool to cool down in the summer? And how many of our children are having to draw to our public streams because they don't have an opportunity to go to the local pool to cool down. So many of us can shop the perimeter of the store, the fresh vegetables, the fresh seafood, and how many of us are relying on our natural streams to supplement their diet, and you might not be aware of how many that is. And then so many of us, we go to our offices and it's climate controlled, and we work in and out day after day, and we're not really affected by what's happening to our rivers and our streams, and our oystermen, what's happened to their offices. So this gives you a sense for how we try to translate what's happening in our waters and our watersheds to a human element, which is really the place where the faith community is compelled most. So these exposures to realities is part of the awareness process. There's obviously this gap between, what is the reality and what is it that we as people of faith understand our Creator has intended for us. And so this gap is where IPC operates. We claim that gap. It could go either way. You could be very overwhelmed in that gap and be kind of frozen into inaction. And IPC claims that gap for God, for good, but I also say for God, and we work to bring about change. And so the next step is education, and this is an example of one of our educational programs. We do a tree planting program throughout the state, and that's in partnership with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. And actually, just real quick, so we're not a technical group, and we can't possibly do a planting plan and devise, what's going to work best on this congregation's land for native species. And so we're constantly brokering connections with the technical groups that can handle that. There's no way anybody can be great with the faith community and also great with stormwater management. So we have to recognize what our limitations are. That's part of the strategy, and finding the partners that can work with you on that. So as part of the tree planting program, they go through an educational process. So it's more than just planting trees. They're actually learning about why is this important. And right here, this anecdotal evidence, I'm sure you've been kind of reading on your own already. We're talking about, this is a gateway program for a lot of people. It's hard for us to imagine somebody didn't understand the importance of trees, but there are people out there that didn't understand the importance of trees until we began to talk to them. And another campaign, well, not campaign, but just translating messages with the stormwater utility fees or the rain tax. There was a lot of different messages going around out there, and with a team of great advisors, we settled it on something that made sense for the faith community, and that was God makes the rain, but we make the runoff. So taking that pun on rain tax and actually switching that around to to helping the congregations understand this really is our responsibility. We're all in this. Regardless of how small your property is, we cannot say we are the drop of water that didn't turn the water mill. And so that was a lot of the messaging that seemed to work really well with the faith community. And then in Prince George's County, we're working with a handful, and the reason I wanted to just go through this, we're working with a handful of underrepresented congregations there, about 6. And the reason I brought this one up is this is a 10,000 mega Baptist church, one of the influential leaders in the community. What First Baptist Church of Glenarden is going to do, everybody's going to watch, and they're going to do the same thing. So on the left there, you have a picture. This is what we're calling a nominal process. We have Dr. Terry Williams is standing there. She's our facilitator, and we're going through a process with a core group of leaders from Glenarden, and we're doing awareness, we're doing education, and then we're starting to prioritize action, all within a faith lens. And there's this gentleman that's there, Deacon Featherstone, and he's kind of like there because somebody told him he had to be there. It's very interesting when you're working with a mega church. You're not working with lay leaders. They run themselves like a corporation, if you're not really aware of this. And so everybody in this room is staff, and they're there because their boss told them to be there. And so we're into the education piece, and Trey Sherrard is with the Anacostia River Keeper, and he's a partner with us on this, and he's going through and kind of presenting facts. Did you know that 17,000 people consume fish from the Anacostia River on an annual basis? And did you know that there's toxic hotspots? And this man just begins to open up, and we had like blocked out 15 minutes for this educational segment, and he just kept asking questions, wanting us to go back and delve in deeper. And what do you mean? What is this? What is this toxic hotspot? What does that mean? And so 45 minutes later, me and Dr. Williams are looking at each other like, oh gosh, okay, the agenda's totally hijacked. We're never going to get to priorities. He was totally on board with us, and has the one on the right, you can see him standing there with his notes on the pavement there. We're here now with Prince George's County. Trey's standing there. We're looking at their parking lot. We're making decisions about how they're going to redo their runoff from there. They have a dry pound that's probably going to get completely redone, and this man now is leading the charge. And then he contacted me shortly after most of the decision making was done with Prince George's County, and he says, I sit on the board for the Association for Church Administrators, and I really want you to come and speak to them. There's about 30 churches that they really need to hear this. So they may not be advocates. They're not going to the legislators and writing letters, but they are affecting change. And that's I think about the limit of what IPC can do. We can do some letter writing and some mobilizing, but we really are at the core of trying to get those leaders within. How am I doing on time? Okay. He's not even watching. Okay, so just a little synopsis. So this is the model in which we operate. So what are some of these outcomes? Public witness. We held a couple walk the talk gatherings last year to get faith communities that understand the message to actually, act out upon the message. And I think in a combination of the two of them, we had about 100 different people show up, I think encompassing 40 to 50 congregations. One of them, there were letters that were sent to Senator Casemeyer and Roby. Is that the other one? Okay, not many, but a few. We've got a couple folks that write letters to the editor, and then we did have a volunteer that testified at the one of the hearings to repeal the stormwater fee. So it's slow, it's small, but it's probably people that wouldn't have been doing those things otherwise. And then in terms of implementation, there's some figures, but that 30 plus stormwater projects in the next 3 years, that's actually wrong. I didn't even include the almost 30 from Riverwise. So really, that's looking like 60. So if you could look at a map, and this is our dream someday, it would be great to see all these different things happening on a map. And you talk about this social pressure. Maybe congregations would. Why is my congregation not on that map? I need to be on that map, and I want somebody to be able to click on my congregation and say, wow, they are relevant in the issues of today.
Beacon on the hill.
Right, beacon on a hill. So this, this is just a fun, we're trying to get people to not talk about rain tax. We're talking about care for creation, and water is sacred, and I think it is a huge potential. Just here, this is again from that website, thearda.com. 733 places of worship in Montgomery County, Baltimore County, over 5,000 in Maryland. What is it watershed wide? Somebody would have to break that down by county to add that up, and I haven't done that. It's probably, 40,000 or something, right? So what a tremendous potential. We can't possibly do it all. We need to be able to train those folks in the individual congregations to get the basic information and the basic inclination, and then go from there. We need to be able to provide resources. But really, as people of faith, we can't do everything. We can do one or two things very well, and then we ask God's grace to come in and do the rest. And that's really what it's built on. So thank you.
Yeah. So just really quick, what I wanted to say. So you guys aren't going to do slides, right? So yeah, we can shut this down. Just to come back to the point about the bringing the right people to the right place to affect change. It was really important that there was this testimony that was offered by the faith community, because one of the major things that legislators were talking about was, well, how are our churches and nonprofits going to cope with these fees, right? How are they going to deal with it? And then so there was sort of a lot of blowback about it, but it wasn't necessarily based on the legislators actually hearing that. It's like somebody said this, and then it got repeated, and legislators are like, yeah, you're right, that is unfair. And then so, having people come out and sort of put the lie to that and say no, we're embracing this challenge. And there was actually at one of the House hearings, there were a couple legislators that were really sort of went on the attack, and they attacked these sort of two friendly older church ladies. And I was like, of all the witnesses that are up here talking about this is who you're going after. And it was really almost comical, how badly they did, because these women did amazing. They just were amazingly poised and responsive, and they're like, no, we feel called to do this. This is not a big deal. And so they were these legislators were trying to pin this rap on them, and they were just like, no, we're good. And it was really amazing, and it's sort of all just the wind went out of the sails of that hearing at that point. And so it was really incredible. And they're not trained public speakers. They were just speaking from the heart, and it was really meaningful. So, Ramon, can I ask you to come up next?
Sure.
All right. But even if I shut this down, that the projector will turn off? Let's find out. No?
Maybe it will.
Meh.
It wasn't on earlier.
All right, let's see what happens.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's recording.
Hello, everyone. Ramon Palencia, Maryland LCB. And I'm the Latino Reach person there. So what I want to talk about is a little bit about Latinos, their connection to the environment, and what are the barriers, what are the opportunities that we have to expand our job to this underserved and minority communities. So the first thing that I want to say, when you think about Latinos might not connect to the environment, but that is somehow not correct and somehow correct. The way we see the environment, many of us that are here, is just petitions, going to Annapolis and talking to elected officials, that kind of thing. But for us, for Latinos, it's a different connection. We are conservationists, but we are not sending petition conservationists or signing. So since we were kids, we go to the outdoors, we go with our parents, we go to the creeks, we go to the forest, to the woods, and it's something that we live, but it's in a different way. So here in Maryland, there's a big opportunity to engage those communities that have been left on the side from many of the environmental groups. So we think that Maryland LCB thinks that it's a good partner for the environment. So we started this program a year ago. And some of the things that we've been finding and learning with this community, let me talk to you about some of the barriers and how are we breaching those barriers. The first thing is many of them are immigrants, recent arrivals, so there's low awareness between the connection of the environment, health, and other social issues. So the way we're addressing that is kind of making sure that they understand that connection, making sure that we don't talk per se about the environment or environmental justice, but we do talk to them about health. What is the implications of, let's say, carbon pollution on their communities, on their kids, on their children? One thing that you mentioned is subsistence fishing. Many Latinos go to the Anacostia River. I work mostly on Prince George's County. So they go to the Anacostia River, they go fishing. There's some advisories that are already on the floor. They don't have, they might not speak the language, so they don't have access to that information. They fish, they bring it home, feed their kids, pregnant wives. So those are the things that we talk about. How can we make sure that we start connected to them, making the problem relevant to their community, bringing the environment to their community, not some, like many times we try to do, like taking them to the Chesapeake Bay out there, but they don't have that connection. So making those problems relevant to their home is very important for us to do. Another thing, the framework is there's a barrier in culture, language. So many Latinos come to this country, and they come from countries that there's like the environmental degradation is huge. So they come here, they think everybody's clean, pristine. So we need to make that connection, that awareness, making sure that they understand of the pollution risks that they have here, like the fishing, like the air, breathing at home, lead, pesticides, people working on some applicators and bringing those risks home, pesticides. So that's the connection that we're trying to make, making sure that they understand. And another thing that we're trying to do is bring a value to those communities. If we're talking about renewable energy, we don't want to talk about something that climate change might be abstract for them, but we want to talk about savings at home, saving energy, switching to renewable, that kind of things that they bring a value to them. And we talk about rain gardens and that, what we are trying to introduce to them is like, you can cultivate your own food, you have access to food, you have access to clean food, vegetables and everything. So that's the type of message that is resonating with them. And something that you guys also do is look for those connectors. For youth faith communities, for us is those organizations that they already have a power capital on the community. They might engage them on access to health, access to education, healthy food for the kids. So it's easier for me to bring the environmental justice connection and engage them. We're trying to do something similar. So we just want to work with you guys. You have the connections, you have the capital there, you have the leaders within the community. We did a poll early this year. That's when I was starting this Maryland LCB. And one of the things that we recognize is that we cannot come from outside the community and tell them what we think is best for them, but they need to go with the leaders that they already have. And those are the leaders that we need to align with us, and that will go farther down the road with that. Because there's a history, as we all know, in those communities, and it's very, very difficult to break that history. So that's one of the things that we are trying to make sure that we don't follow the same path that some other organizations have done before. And issues approach, the same, I already touched on that. And what else can I tell you about that? I haven't prepared anything, so as you can see, I was hoping that it'll be more kind of like a question type of conversation. But this is basically what we are doing. We're trying to create education opportunities so youth can engage in environmental issues and can be leaders in their communities. We're trying to create civic engagement opportunities. Another thing that we realize is that when these communities arrive in this area, their civic engagement is so low, so it's very difficult for them to participate on government or some other type of discussion. So what we're trying to do is see if we can create opportunities for them to engage at a local level so they can participate in the discussion, their voice can be heard, because up until this point they just don't participate. There are many issues, as we all know, from language to immigration status and things like that, that is just very difficult for them to participate. So that's another thing that we focus on. We want to make sure that we bridge that gap. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Julie, and I'll definitely take questions after that.
How do you deal with the issue of immigration and the undocumented and engaging folks? And I'm sure that's very difficult.
How do we? Well, unfortunately, we don't deal with that. Our organization doesn't deal with that. But one thing that we do is when some other organizations that basically work on that issue, like when the new order just came out a couple of weeks ago, I was very quick and to participate, make sure that we were with them, make sure that we congratulate them and express our sympathy to that. We don't do immigration as one of our main themes, but we understand the value of that for those communities. So we try to, I don't want to say partner, but be sympathetic to that. I wish there was a way that we can have a position on that, but unfortunately. So. a little bit complicated.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Lawson. I'm the director of Trash Free Maryland and Trash Free Virginia, and Trash Free Anacostia, which is the name of my DC shop. So I, for about 5 years, have been sort of a bag lady for the Mid-Atlantic, and Suzanne's story made me think, well, I could spend a lot of time going out and being in everybody's face myself and getting my picture on everybody's steering wheel, and then they would all use their reusable bags. But that's not really a productive use of my time. So in 2010, actually Brent, when he was at Anacostia Watershed Society, and a colleague at Alice Ferguson Foundation, and I started Trash Free Maryland and Trash Free Virginia to try to bring together all of the groups in the region that have some interest in trash, so that we were all working together on a common policy agenda, and at the same time make it a bigger deal. People care about trash, but as far as the environmental coalitions were working, it really wasn't an issue on the table. They were talking about water, but they were talking about runoff. They weren't talking about trash. But then you go into the community and everybody's talking about trash, and nobody was really organized around it. And we see, I had come from an organization that did a lot of cleanups, and we knew lots of other volunteer groups that did a lot of cleanups. And you go out every Saturday and you pick up trash and you say, this is terrible, but I feel great at the end. And anybody can go do it. If they're 5 years old or 85 years old, they can go out and do it. If they're black, if they're white, if they're rich or they're poor, they're all doing this. But then they go back the next week and the trash is back. And then they go back the next week and the trash is back. And they feel good when they clean it up, but then they feel bad that it keeps coming back. And then some of them get spurred to action. What can I do to solve this? Well, if they're working in a volunteer organization, that group may not have the capacity to then go to Annapolis or Richmond or the DC Council and actually advocate for policies to prevent that from happening in the first place. So I like to say I give people their Saturdays back, because we're going to pass the laws that get that trash out of the waters, out of the neighborhoods. So we actually, because we have a small staff of me, but also to keep it really focused, and so people know what we do. We only have 5 things we work on. We work on bag bills at the local and state level. We work on polystyrene foam bans at the local and eventually state level. Ultimately, we want to work on a bottle bill, a container deposit. And those 3 things come from the trash collection devices that are, especially in the Anacostia River, but also in Baltimore Harbor. And what we know from cleanups around the watersheds in the Bay are, those are the 3 most common items that we can legislate. We don't have a solution. If anyone has any ideas on snack food wrappers, I would love to work on that. But there aren't really best practice policy solutions for that yet. But then at the same time, we need to strengthen enforcement. So we work on laws to make litter and dumping laws stronger and easier to implement. And then for some of the source reduction policies we have, more access to residential composting would make things way easier for those other programs to be implemented. So we support those where we can. That's it. If we can increase access to recycling, which could help support the bottle bill, great. So last year, in 2014, we passed a foam ban in DC. We're going to pass the foam ban in Montgomery County in a few weeks. And we passed a law putting points on the driver's licenses of illegal dumpers in Maryland. And we mandated recycling bins next to trash cans at public events in Maryland. Thank you. And I think we've done a really great job of elevating the profile of trash. People now are introducing a bill, they call us and they say, like, what is this? And we're at the table now in these conversations. So we work in a couple of different ways. As Brent was saying, we're soup to nuts on this. I'm in the community meetings in Prince George's County and in Baltimore listening to the residents. And there was a woman a couple of years ago in Baltimore who said she came to learn more about trash because her son was murdered a few years ago. And she knows that she wanted to know about the connection between litter and crime because she saw the litter on her street getting more and more severe, and she really worried about all the other kids in the neighborhood and their safety. And I was like, that is way more powerful than any story I can ever come up with. And so it's just like the reasons that people get involved in this, and there absolutely is a connection between crime and litter. So I'm starting to explore what kind of tactics are gang outreach groups doing that I can then use, because it's going to be a similar audience of trying to overcome some of these behavioral things, trying to get, you know, people who don't have a strong value on other people's lives. Those groups are working on trying to get them to stop violent crime. In the same way that litter, for a lot of people, doesn't seem like that big of a deal. How do we overcome that barrier? We also, you know, I've been working a lot with the Alice Ferguson Foundation on their litter behavior studies, worked on their anti-litter public education campaign, and things we know are 40% of people admit that they litter. And they do it because they feel a lack of control in their lives and they want to prove something. They're rebelling. It's their way of controlling the little bit that they've got. They want to keep their house clean and their car clean, and that's about the extent of what they consider their personal space. And the broader world around them doesn't matter as much. So they're happy to just get it out of my space and into somebody else's. And maybe at the same time they feel like they're creating jobs. A lot of their family may work for public works or sanitation and be picking that up. And so it's a job creator. It demonstrates rebellion against the world. In Baltimore, one of our organizers says that it proves that they're hard, is the word that they use, that they can, you know, we also know that they drug dealers take advantage of illegal dumping because it's easier to hide the drugs in it for their deals. And they'll use dumping to block alleys so that police can't come in and see what's going on. There's just the connections that we're finding across the state are really interesting. We work with advocates in other sectors. You know, a couple of years ago we worked on a bill to increase the penalty for stealing shopping carts. Because one of our groups has pulled 250 shopping carts out of the stream, and they know that that's bad for their volunteers because they rust and they cut the volunteers, and they also create dams of trash that get caught in it. But it also put us on the same side and in Annapolis at the same testimony panel with the Retail Association, who we need to support the bag law. And so by showing up by that, saying we're going to work with you on something that's important to you, quid pro quo is how they work, so that's how we're going to work. We also work with code enforcement and housing. The Baltimore Development Corporation represents works with the small businesses in Baltimore, and I was able to bring them around on the bag bill this year just by like talking them through it. A lot of people hear these kinds of nanny-state type of laws and they're immediately repelled by it. And once you talk through it with them, they understand where their common interests. But you know, kind of in our wheelhouse is also training the other water, climate, and health advocates so that they can be advocates on this issue where they may not have been before. You know, I know a lot of groups talk about trash as an issue that they work on, but they're so focused on the general runoff problem or toxics or other things that they're not spending a lot of time learning about trash specifically. And so I am tracking those bills. I am letting them know where they can plug in and what their expertise is. The jar, which I'm happy to pass around, the lid is really secure, so don't worry about this. Back in mid-November, we took 14 advocates, press, funders, community activists out on the bay, and we sampled with a very fine mesh net for plastic. We know about the garbage patches in the oceans. We know about the trash that's in our rivers, but there hasn't been a lot of work done on the bay. So we wanted to go out and find out, but beyond that, I wanted to show everybody else. And so it was great for 4 days. I had a captive audience that I could just fill their brains with all this trash info. So this is the best sample we got, which was from the day after Labor Day. And especially if you look at the bottom, you can see all the tiny pieces of plastic. There you go. And if you look in the water, you see all these little balls floating around, these little tiny specks. Those are microbeads from face wash that go straight down the drain they are too small for wastewater treatment facilities to filter out. So they go straight into the river and into the bay. Everything in there is made of almost all the trash in there. 80% of the trash in the water came from land in the oceans. Most of it is plastic because that's what persists all the way through the storm drain system. Plastic is made of petroleum. Fertilizers and pesticides are also made of petroleum. As we learned in middle school science, oils bond. So all this plastic that's floating in the bay is also absorbing all of the pesticides and fertilizers that are also washing into the bay. And then they're so small that they're mistaken for plankton and other small aquatic life by our oysters, by our crabs, by our fish. So we're hoping one day we had out, actually the day of that jar, we had Jeff Corbin, the senior advisor for the EPA on the Chesapeake Bay with us. And he said, I humored you when I came on this. I thought we'd find a piece of trash. And he saw that. And the guy we had on our science help on this said that was 10 times the density of plastic that he's found in the ocean samples he's taken. So we're now hoping to work with Jeff and some of his folks at EPA to do it again next summer for a month so we can get a lot more samples, so we can give them to other advocates to take around, because seeing is believing that it's really a problem. We also are coordinating people's testimony. You know, we have all these water groups that come out. So in Montgomery County, we did our hearing for the foam ban to ban clamshells and cups and plates and things from carry-out restaurant places. And instead, you know, on a normal hearing like that, you would have all the little stream groups all show up, and they would all have done their own research, and they would all come out with the 18 reasons why I should ban this. And it would all sound the same, and it would all be pretty bland. And instead, we had 12 groups show up from our side, and Friends of Sligo Creek talked about Sligo Creek and Tacoma Park. The Montgomery Countryside Alliance talked about the Ag Reserve. Neighbors of Northwest Branch talked about their cleanups in Northwest Branch. Surfrider Foundation showed up and talked about paddling in the river and running into trash. And everybody had their own story, and they couldn't have done that if they weren't coordinated into one group. So that, and it really resonated for the council members because they were hearing from their constituents, hearing about their neighborhood issues, and they really appreciated the diversity and the fact that we were able to cover the whole county this way. And then lastly, you know, Jody and IPC don't work directly on a lot of advocacy work, but on this foam ban in particular, it's going to affect congregations and what they can do. And so we're working with people like Jody, we're working with the business associations, and hopefully I'm working more with Latino groups, because getting to these business owners and getting to these populations that are affected by these legislation that we pass, we need them educated about it. So we want to go to the congregations and say, here's what the foam ban means for you and how to implement it, and here's some support. We're working with the Greens in Montgomery and Prince George's on how they would, to be a clearinghouse for businesses that are curious about how it works. 10% of Montgomery County businesses are Latino owned, and so making sure that they understand how the bag fee works and that they're implementing it correctly so that it's more popular for people because it's not inconsistent. So I think that's rambled on enough about what I am doing, and I hope that answered the question about advocacy tools.
Yes. Okay, thank you, panelists. That was wonderful. So if you guys could come up, we'll let's do a little bit of discussion, Q&A or whatever, to get some questions from the audience. But I just wanted to say a couple things again, as I've been trying to sort of gel my own thinking about how to do this stuff and how to be more effective going forward, and what implementing effective advocacy really looks like. And I've been this fall going through a really amazing program called the Environmental Leadership Program, and I just came back like 2 hours ago from our final retreat, and we spent a lot of time this weekend. One of their employees has sort of deep training in social justice movements, and we spent a lot of time talking about these issues and sort of, you know, how do we do better? Because if you look around at sort of the number of people in the state of Maryland that self-identify as environmentalists or have some connection to an organization. It's an incredible amount of people, but we have less, so looking at the amount of people, 1 million people out of about 8 million, we have actually much less influence than we should. And so my question is, why is that? And I don't know that I have an answer yet, but one of the things that was really insightful to me was, you know, we were talking about the freedom struggle and some of the lessons learned from that. And one of the things that was really rang true to me was that there isn't one strategy for achieving social change, and there isn't an answer. There's just efforts, and there isn't you know, any one group, or it's not top-down coordinated, right? And so it's about different groups of people, like, speaking from their hearts and going out and making a demand of power and trying to get change that way. And so it really made me, it brought together for me sort of some of actually, in a lot of ways, if you will, the pluralism of the environmental community can be a drawback. There's a lot of us and we're doing all sorts of different stuff. But it's also really powerful in a way because there's that many people mobilized with like a specific set of issues. And so what I think is really interesting about the work that these people are doing is that they're mobilizing a set of people that is not necessarily identified as like a traditional environmentalist. And I think that that is growing this as a social movement. So that was what was really powerful and important to me, and looking at sort of, you know, inside game, outside game, different strategies. It's like there's many ways to get there, and, you know, the answer isn't which one, the answer is all of the above. Yeah, I think that was all I had to say. So do you guys have any questions? Yeah, please.
So I really like the stewardship and the rain garden idea. And since the last election, I did notice that there's definitely a revolt against taxes. And obviously the rain tax is unpopular. We just didn't do something right, but it doesn't mean to stop doing or stopping runoff like that. And I know if we could do something like this in the rural part of Baltimore County, that'd be great, because there are people who have property probably longer than the stamp of just lawns, and I feel like you don't have to cut all that, you know, that's what wastes the money. And these stewardship gardens won't hinder their view, and probably make their property look better. And especially rural churches could be a big influence on the area.
Yeah, so in Baltimore County, there's a number of different, you know, depending on where you are, there's a number of different watershed groups. So it might be good to sort of go back to whatever the watershed group is that is part of Baltimore County, and sort of have a discussion about how there could be an implementation or an increase in citizen stewardship, sort of a train the trainer kind of thing. It doesn't have to be the academy model, but, you know, there are a number of different models out there. So what part of Baltimore County are you in?
It's Hartford Road. So
Okay.
I usually drive around there, and there's just a lot of people who have, like I said, I'm like, plant a whole garden and have
Or even trees.
Yes.
Trees are easy.
Even like a meadow of flowers or something by high season, and it's still, you still have your view, and it would actually be a benefactor to the community as well, and especially the watersheds and the Gunpowder River.
Yeah, so the reason the people aren't, maybe because they're otherwise engaged, haven't thought about it, don't realize the importance, or it could be that they do and they don't know how to go about doing it. So certainly some sort of a neighborhood by neighborhood, train the trainer kind of thing would be helpful.
Just helping people connect the dots. Yeah, and I think with congregations, the biggest barriers are the technical capacity and the financial capacity. And when the programs that we have found a lot of success with are where we have put together the partners and the resources to help the congregations overcome that. So the trees planting program that, you know, we were talking about a little bit, that's entirely free to congregations. You know, and we're always, it's a robust waiting list for congregations to get into that program. They get the free planting plan, they get the free trees, they get a crew leader that day. You know, their skin in the game is they have to assemble volunteers to listen to the messages and maintain the trees for 10 years. Now that's a huge cost that the watershed community doesn't have to take on, you know, and so we have to justify that in the grant funding and explain, you know, this is a big cost that the congregations are taking on. But I do think that it's a combination of not being aware and then not like you said in your talk too, just not knowing where to begin and how to do that if you don't have the money to do it.
I wanted to pick up on that because I like the way you're using the language of the faith-based community and stewardship and the creation, and have all the actions and thinking centered around those, that people can really identify with those two really large concepts in a very personal way. And I was really interested in how, if you think it was a best, maybe a good scenario of how did you change the narrative? Because I was thinking, like, in structuration theory, we look at structured behavior and we create these patterns of behavior. And, so I'm a gardener and I give away a lot of plants every summer, usually herbs, to my friends. And verbally I got some friends that when they come to the garden, they like it, I want this, and I give it to them. Then next 2 weeks, it's dead. So although you give them the information, there's still this structured behavior, right, of ignoring that, you need to do more than just plant it there, but you need to go back to it and check it out and give it a little water, maybe, So could you give us how do you change that narrative? Because I think changing the narrative is, from what I look at it, is kind of an intervention into a cultural change. Right?
So are you asking how did we figure out the narrative that's going to speak to them, or
how do you change the narrative in order? Because that was one of your slides. How do you change the narrative? How do you do that? Is this an internal narrative, or is the narrative external?
So I think if I understand your question correctly, I would say that we're translating the messaging, and when I say change the narrative, I'm saying rather than the congregations revolting against a rain tax for one of the first times they're a regulated entity with the stormwater utility fee system, and they have to pay fees that they don't understand why, and so that was their initial response. And so then when I say change the narrative, I'm referring to changing that to an understanding, shifting that to an understanding of their responsibilities. And so how do we do that? I think we throw all the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. I don't know that there was really a systematic approach, except that we looked within ourselves and what are the messages that compel us as people of faith. And Kolia's here, and she can help me out answering this question if I'm not making sense. But I think it wasn't a systematic thing. It was actually honestly a prayerful thing. Like, what got me into this game? What do I think is getting other people of faith into this game, and what's going to speak to them? And how do we make this about our Creator than about all these other systems that really, in the grand scheme of things, maybe they don't matter. We know that people of faith answer to something bigger than the bottom line. They should, if they're going to put their money where their mouth is. So I think it was kind of a reflection on that. I don't know, is that answering what you were?
Yeah, and if I could jump in on that a little bit, because Jody and I work together on some of this messaging stuff. Obviously, when you hear something like rain tax, it's painful for me to say this, those two words. It's deeply misleading, but that's part of the reason why it's so effective, right? And so Jody was actually part of a project that we did. We actually did like focus group research in a number of different communities in the state to talk about this and find out what was a more compelling way to talk about it. And so, talking about stormwater or stormwater management, that goes right over people's heads. That sounds like engineering. So what we really realized was very effective was polluted runoff, which is what it is. And so we started talking about polluted runoff, and that was a message change that we really wanted to deliver to people. So that was an important thing, was to start talking about it in that way, and that sort of helped people reframe it. But then we also started explaining some of it was just, again, churches hadn't been regulated entities before. So, those of us who do public policy can distinguish between taxes and fees, right? But everybody else in the world just gets a bill, and it's a tax, right? And so there's some, to go out there and sort of explain and say, well, here's the what and the why. And so that explanation part was very important. But then it wasn't just, so there was a bit of messaging that was done for the general public, and then Jody's piece and the profound insight was like changing that then into a piece that made sense to the faith community. God makes the rain, we make the runoff is genius. It's complete genius because it's true, and it puts the onus exactly where it belongs. And it's a really pithy way of saying, it just puts the lie to the rain tax thing and puts the onus where it belongs, like, so effectively. And so I thought that was really a powerful message. And the other thing, when you're doing sort of messaging and behavior change, is that all people hold a certain set of values. And, ideally, you don't want to act in a way that is counter to your values. And so what happens sometimes is that people don't necessarily understand that they're acting in a way that's counter to their values. They get this bill and they say, we can't afford to pay this. This is terrible. And then Jody comes in and says, well, this is actually, what this is about is creation care. And then your values and this policy link up. And now it's something that's internal and you understand it, and it's a way that you can engage with it. So making that connections between like values and the behaviors that need to change or the policies that need to happen is really important. And honestly, that's most of what communications messaging is really all about, is, getting to people's values and having them be on the same page. And I think an important thing, since I have the mic, this is, and because this is an environmental justice conference, is, understanding that diverse audiences have diverse opinions. And I will not point at any members of the environmental community in particular, but I think a lot of environmental advocates, because they believe that there is a moral element to what is happening to our environment, and they're very compelled to act by it, is that it makes some advocates can be myopic. And so their approach is like, well, these people just don't know. And once they know what I know, then they'll agree, and then they'll come with me. They're going to get on I'm going to bring these people onto my bus, and we're going to go together someplace. And I think that that's really a profound mistake. And I think that that's why this messaging is really important, and this work, it's sort of bringing together, like, demonstrating like where the shared values are. And there's actually a quote I wanted to work in from this weekend. It's and so here's the perfect time. It's from an Aboriginal activist named Lila Watson, and I think this is really amazing quote. So she was an activist, an Aboriginal activist in Australia. And she said, if you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. If you have come because your liberation is bound with mine, then let us work together. And I think that that's like really, that had been bouncing around in my head, and I'd been trying to figure out like how to articulate that piece. And like it came together for me like this weekend, and this quote was a big part of it.
No, you're absolutely right. I mind blanked on the focus groups. That's the scientific piece of it behind it, yeah. And what it led to was we were playing around with words of rain is natural, polluted runoff is unnatural, and it was actually more of a communications person that then wait a second, we can talk about rain being natural from God, so yeah, it was an evolution.
If I could piggyback on that, I think the role that IPC plays is shining a light on the traditional teachings that really do express these values, but sometimes they aren't heard from the pulpit, and they may not be commonly heard within the congregation. So we're lifting up what's already there within the faith community's teaching.
Anybody else have a question? Something for the... Sure.
Pretty much I actually was, supportive of styrofoam bales and bottle bales, and in fact, Maryland Public Interest Research Group on our campus, we actually abandoned our campaign for bottle bill here, because we were extremely skeptical about the next 4 years and having it passed through because of, again, a tax revolt, I guess. But I would say, and I told the one person, if you were here for that big panel in there, he was from Curtis Bay, student activist group, and I was telling him about elementary schoolers in Tacoma Park that really pushed the styrofoam ban for Montgomery County, Piney Branch Elementary, and they originally started out doing polar bears, and you just really got a symbolic gesture from the senators that they went to, that there really much they can do. So they started doing styrofoam, and they were saying, well, this is carcinogen, it hurts our health, and we are paying tax dollars for which to keep ourselves. So they went to the Montgomery County Board of Ed, but they were kind of douchebags about it. I'm sorry to use that word, because they were like, no, we don't want to hear it. So then they went to City of Tacoma Park. They got all government purchases banned from styrofoam. They went to Montgomery County. They banned government purchases, but they exempted the school system. So one of their goals now is to find funds and raise money to have real silverware and washers and plates. And I'm just really proud. And elementary school as well, people are really pushing for this.
Yeah.
Because they are starting to see how it affects their community.
It's the Young Activists Club, and actually a lot of them are now in middle school and even a couple in early high school now, and several of them came and testified for the countywide foam ban. And it was amazing to see this like 12-year-old girl in Chuck Taylor's talking about neurotoxicants. But yeah, they've raised $10,000 to buy a dishwasher for their school, and the county won't let them spend it because they don't want to pay for the reusable trays. But they did get Tacoma Park to pass a stronger version of the county ban that'll take effect in July. So I believe they may have made progress toward getting their, at least in their school, but they're still looking at this countywide support. Yeah, with the bottle bill, I mean, I've always taken a long view on that. I mean, right now Maryland recycles 22% of its beverage containers. A 5-cent deposit would get us to 75%, 76% even. And bottles are, half of the trash that's pulled out of trash traps in the Anacostia, so we would make a huge dent in that trash problem with it. They're really hard to pass anyway. Massachusetts has had one for 30 years, and for 15 years they've been trying to expand it to include such novelties as bottled water and tea and juice. And they got it on the ballot for last month for the November election, and the beverage industry in the month before dumped $8 million into an advertising campaign, and they beat it by 40 points. And this is a really popular program, and all they were trying to do was expand it. 40 points is a gigantic margin. $8 million versus, again, our staff is one. So the idea has always been to use the bag bill and the foam bill and other smaller bills to build that power, to get more groups involved, get more congregations involved, get more people understanding the issue and the cost of trash, so that in 6 or 10 years when we're ready to do a big push for the bottle bill, we are ready to go and be successful right out of the block. But it won't be because we got lucky. It's because we were really strategic in building our alliances ahead of time and educating people about the total problem and not just that one bill. So yeah, I mean, I've been here a couple of times talking to the SGA and to Mary Kirk Students Group and about different things, so you guys are members.
I should note that I'm part of the Student Sustainability Committee. One of our colleagues, Annie Rice, was able to get some members of the bars out in the city to start recycling and
Awesome.
program, and especially Terrapin Church was very helpful.
Cool.
I saw your awesome painted dumpster when I was driving in here. Go Love Green, or what is it?
I think also a lot of
Go Green and Love Red, Blue,
Yeah.
Red, Black, and Gold. Yeah, it's cool.
I had a question for Ramon.
Yes.
Two things you mentioned which sparked my interest. You said in the Hispanic and Latino community, you really need to focus on existing leaders, the leaders that have emerged from that community or are already active. And the second point you made was accompanying or supporting existing civic engagement activities or sponsoring civic engagement activities. Could you talk more about where the likely places where you find leaders within those communities? Are there specific leaders that you look to, or you and are there particular types of civic engagement activities that you would describe?
Leaders, well, what I meant is There are a number of Latino organizations that they per se are not environmental organizations, and they have a tremendous big leaders. They are ferocious advocates for whatever they believe. Just immigration reform is one of the big things for them, access to health, education for the kids and things like that. And they're leaders that either they, from the get-go, recognize the need to engage, for Latinos to engage in those environmental justice issues, because they do see the connection, environmental health, that some other people in the community might not see. So they're very quickly on board. And another thing that you need to make with these leaders is make sure that they, since their background is not on environmental issues, make sure that you train them, you talk to them so they feel comfortable advocating for these issues, because that's the connection that we need to make. Make sure that they feel comfortable talking about the environment, because something that they usually don't do, but they can understand that once you talk to them. And so what is very important to do, it's increase the capacity with those organizations. They already have a structure, they're very good at what they do, and it's just how can we push for the environment within those organizations. And it's just having that push, making sure that they have access to grants. Some of them are small organizations, do a great job. Can you bring the capacity so they can apply for those grants? Because since that's something that they don't do, the environment, they are not aware of that. But they already have those leaders. They've been cultivated for many, many years, and they're very good at that. And another thing that you mentioned is civic engagement. It's what I was telling him is just many of these communities are recent arrivals. They come from countries where the rule of law is non-existent. That's why they come here. And when they come here, there's there might be some legal irregularities. So they are kind of, I don't want to say they live in the shadows, but it's just that wishy-washy time in their lives. And so what we are trying to do is, since we are not an immigration advocating organization, what we're trying to do is see if we can engage with organizations that advocate for that in terms like there are people that are living in the shadows, there are people that are being affected by climate change, by pollution, and they don't have an answer. I mean, they cannot have a say because of their legal status. Once you regularize those people, they're going to be advocates on those issues that affect them, like pollution, access to health. So we're trying to merge both camps a little bit. One thing that we did this year, it was to, we reached out to probably 50, 60,000 minority people, African American and Latinos. They were irregular. There were voters that voted in a general election, but not on a midterm election. We tried to reach out to them in English and in English for the African American, Latino community bilingual, make sure that they absentee ballots, they go to vote, follow up with, we send in an absentee ballot request, we follow up with telephone calls, just, get out the vote, just to make sure that they're part of that. Their vote is very important, and if they don't vote, they don't have a voice. And here in this country, if you vote, you have a voice, and we want to make sure that they understand that, so we just kind of make sure that they get into that cycle of voting, participating, and sometimes you got to start with small things and escalate that. Sometimes just going and talk to them and giving the opportunity to talk to me back is something that not other people have done in terms of the environment. So it's very important to start that engagement at a lower level and go escalating and do that kind of program.
Well, it's about time. If we just do this last question.
Yeah, I have a question about the academy. Now, tell people about recruitment, training, and how do you communicate to maintain retention for your watershed?
Okay, so recruitment, so we do a class of, we have typically in the past had a goal of graduating 25 stewards per year. So we usually have a class of 30. To get that class of 30 enrolled, we did a mix of communications with our key partners. So we have about 80 business and government and private partners that are part of the academy. So sort of a vast network that way. But we also, to reach out to the specific geographic areas. We did geographically focused stormwater tours and presentations, you know, those kinds of things. For the faith community, we partnered with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, and together we identified sort of a short list. We had a very, very compressed time to recruit stewards for that program. So we identified some goals of having stewards from underrepresented populations geographically and culturally. And so we reached out to areas where we had connections. That's how we do recruitment. So our board has a strategic goal to reach out to some very specific audiences. There are a number that have been identified, and what we need to do is hone down, you know, which ones we're going to go after this year, and the recruitment strategy must be tailored to that audience. So that's sort of to come. And then your other question was about the training.
How long is training? How do you communicate?
How do we communicate
To retain retention.
Oh, retain their attention. So the training program is 64 hours of field and classroom work, and then a large capstone project. So it takes over a year to get certified. And so when someone makes that commitment, you know, there's drop off in every class, but not very much. I think it's because they're committing to this large training program. The issue is, once they're certified, how do we retain their attention? That's sort of the bigger problem or challenge. And so we do have networking meetings throughout the year. We have continuing education, so we try to ask stewards what it is that they want to come back and learn about. And then we have strategic engagement geographically. So in northern Anne Arundel County and southern Anne Arundel County, there are groups of stewards that are trying to keep their fellow stewards engaged. And so this program is it's very social. And so getting folks engaged through the relationships that they've built via the academy is really the key to success, I think. It really is like a big family. And when you walk into a room with the other watershed stewards, it's like you're in the room with people who are so different than you, and yet you feel like they're your best friend. And so that social piece is probably the key to maintaining momentum.
Can I ask one question on that? So it's an interesting model, and there's so much that can be translated. What I think is different is the fact that you guys focus on one county at a time. Like you're beginning to like have these satellite. Like, do you think you could still achieve that sense of family and retention if you were not focused on a smaller geographical region? That is one thing that IPC struggles with, is we are, you know, we're like in too many places, and we're beginning to play around with, you know, do we need to begin to like have these franchises in a way, almost like you guys?
So actually we don't have franchises. So the other Stewards Academies have nothing to do with us, except that we have helped them to replicate the model. I wish there was a stronger sort of tie, but capacity-wise, we haven't had that. And our board actually dealt with that in the strategic plan too. And I think there's a desire on our board to have a greater involvement in the other academies, but we don't have that capacity at this point. But I do think the key to success is local, 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 and that we have the opportunity to focus only on Anne Arundel. I think that's a big key to success. But how do you go bigger? You know, how do you replicate that? And so we sort of think about the stewards model, the train the trainer. So we want to train stewards to train their communities. I think the same could be said for IPC maybe, and communities. Maybe you do a train the trainer kind of model so that you can reach, you know, other people. And I think from a state level, we'd love for there to be the structure where we could do a train the trainer approach for the other academies around. But it is a challenge.
All right, well, I want to personally thank my 4 friends for being on this panel. Thank you. And I give them a round of applause.
Thank you guys for sticking it out so